Welcome, everyone. My name is Doug Reid, President of the Canadian Institute of Forestry and the co-lead with the Centre for Social Intelligence for the Free to Grow in Forestry initiative. Together, we have been embarking on some amazing transformation on DEI since this initiative started 5 years ago, both internal to the CIF and externally across the sector in Canada. Within the CIF, we have created a DEI policy, changed our bylaws to limited board seat terms so we can bring in diverse representation more often. And we have recently established a CIF DEI leadership team within our 17 sections to begin raising awareness and providing training to all those interested in creating a shift in workplace culture in their section. I'm proud to say that our executive committee now has equal representation of women and men for the first time in the history of the CIF. I'm excited to share with you today about how we are empowering the forest sector to take action on diversity, equity, and inclusion across Canada and beyond. The impetus behind this initiative is that this country faces a labor market shortage and the forest sector is not immune. We knew baby boomers were retiring at an alarming rate, and when we took a close look at the statistics on gender diversity, the initial focus of this effort in 2018, we saw that women make up only 17% of the forest sector labor force, and underrepresented groups even less. Research shows that women leave the sector within the first 5 years of their career. So the question we wanted to pursue was why? We started out with identifying the key barriers for women, and they include persistent wage gaps, low retention rates, lack of advancement opportunities, mentors, sponsors, and networks to support women in forestry, and an underlying issue of workplace culture, meaning male-dominated traditional leadership, harassment, and other things. We wanted to tackle these barriers and ensure that all people could work in the forest sector and simultaneously address the labor market demand issues. So how did things get started? The Centre for Social Intelligence had led the development of a mining sector national action plan between 2014 and 2017. On the heels of that, the Forest Products Association of Canada approached CSI and asked if they could do something similar for the forest sector. CSI then formed a partnership with the Canadian Institute of Forestry, and together we pursued funding. In 2018, funding was from both the federal government and the private sector through FPAC to develop a national action plan over a 3-year period. A multi-stakeholder committee was created to help steer the development of the National Action Plan. Stakeholders were represented by the public, private, not-for-profit, academia, and Indigenous groups across Canada. Together, this steering committee came up with a vision for the forest sector, that Canada has a diverse and inclusive workforce that provides the foundation for a thriving forest sector and healthy communities. And they made a joint commitment to work collaboratively across the forest sector to engage, attract, retain, and advance underrepresented groups at all levels. The goal of the initiative in phase 1 was to create gender equality, regardless of race, religion, or other identifiable factors in the sector, by increasing the number of women in senior executive roles and technical woodland positions, explaining the benefits to men of having women in the sector, creating allies and champions across the forest sector, and thereby improving the economic competitiveness of the forest sector as a whole. The first phase of this initiative was what we called Vision to Action, where we collectively created a national action plan that looked at the barriers to women and other underrepresented groups and identified actions to pursue to address those barriers. This slide shows all the things that were created. I know there's a lot to walk through here, but bear with me. It's worth noting because so much was accomplished. The National Action Plan was broken down into three main pillars of activity. The first was called Building the Evidence Base. In that pillar, we established a baseline of data for the first time and brought together information from various pockets, such as the federal government, provincial governments, and regulators, FPAC, the CIF membership, among others. Through that process, we identified gaps to pursue. That was the extent of what we set out to do in this pillar, but we went way beyond that. We also created for the first time gender equality principles for the sector. And we did a qualitative study that showed Indigenous women as leaders, not as victims, as they've been represented in the past. The second pillar we called Fostering an Inclusive Culture. In this pillar, we did a scan of all the best practices out there on creating gender equality and looked for new ways to add value to this important topic. At that time, there was a lot of talk about what this issue was, but there was nothing on how to actually make change to it. So we identified three areas of study and reports were developed on each. They include how to overcome resistance to diversity and inclusion in the workplace, how to be an inclusive leader, and how to be an effective ally. All three of these reports can be found on the Free to Grow website and through our partners' website at the Center for Social Intelligence. They are also on the FPAC website under their 2021 annual report. I'd like to give a shout out to FPAC for showcasing these reports, as it provides further validation that these reports are of value to the sector. The third pillar of activity was called Repositioning the Sector, and it formed the basis of creating the brand, Free to Grow. Which, for those who don't know, this phrase was chosen because in the forest sector, when the forest no longer requires human intervention, it is deemed free to grow. We applied that phrase to the social context and say that all people are free to grow in their careers in the forest sector. We also developed a Free to Grow in Forestry website, a monthly newsletter, and went beyond our initial plans and started a podcast that engages everyone from the C-suite to transgender people to two-spirit people, all telling us their experience in the forest sector in an effort to learn and understand each other better in a non-confrontational way. Phase one was a huge success. We had raised awareness on this important topic, met all the deliverables we set out to do, and went beyond them as well. We had created momentum and were encouraged to keep going, so we did. Funding was again pursued and we were thrilled when it was approved. Phase two started in 2021 and will culminate in 2024. We call it moving from action to traction, where we are focused on engaging and training forest sector leaders and employees to foster an inclusive workplace culture. Think of the goals of phase two as zeroing in on pillar two and three activities from phase one, meaning a focus on fostering an inclusive culture and on communications. Building off the three reports that were created in phase one, the forest sector asked for those to be made into online training. That is what formed the rationale for going back for further funding. So that's what we got busy doing. The initial intent was to create online training modules to follow it up with in-person training so it really could be cemented and applied. However, COVID interfered with that idea. Nevertheless, you can access these training modules on the Free to Grow in Forestry website now, and we have pivoted to virtual workshops starting with today. We want to engage as many executives and middle managers as we can on materials that we believe are useful for shifting the workplace culture and create communication tools for easy use by anyone in the forest sector to apply in their own context. I want to take a moment here now to share this quote with you, because we believe at Free to Grow that it is through empowering executives and managers, most of which are men in the forest sector, we can make a big difference in shifting the workplace culture. When a male ally speaks up, He's not only affecting change in the room at that moment, he's inviting and empowering the next generation of men to use him as a courageous example. And that's how we change a culture. This quote speaks to the essence of what we are aiming to do here in phase 2. Some may be uncomfortable with our focus on white men and our importance as white men as allies. The great majority of workers and leaders in the forest sector are people that look like me. This is especially true in Canada, and we have to start somewhere. Working past our discomfort is the only way that we men can truly engage positively in improving the diversity and inclusion in our sector. Initially, we set up 2 executive leadership teams, one in the East and one in the West. There were approximately 20 executives in each team. However, there was growing interest from folks beyond those 2 teams that also wanted to learn what we were doing. And so that encouraged us to pivot to this platform approach, opening up the workshop to engage everyone. There are 3 webinar training activities. Each workshop will have a review of one of the 3 topics that are part of the Free to Grow in Forestry, Free to Grow learnings given by our co-lead at the Center for Social Intelligence. We are also bringing in speakers. The first webinar was held on December 8th, when we had a focus on how to overcome resistance to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also had a presentation on understanding privilege from another D&I expert, plus knowledge sharing on the Indigenous workforce and how it is primed to work in the forest sector, but needing a better workplace culture to land in. We were excited to see over 150 people turn out for that webinar. We will be holding another webinar on April 27th on the second topic of the Free to Grow learning series, this time on allyship. We will explain what allyship is, how to be one, and how it benefits you as an individual and as an organization. We will also take a close look at bystander syndrome and explain ways to start changing the channel on behavior in your workplace. The fall webinar will focus on the Free to Grow in Forestry topic of inclusive leadership, what it is and how to be an inclusive leader, as well as the benefits of mentoring and sponsorship, and on creating a psychologically safe work environment. Although this not on this screen, we may also hold a final workshop where we will look at case studies, including the lessons learned from the Free to Grow in Forestry initiative, so we can share our learnings with other countries. I encourage you to seek out the training modules through our Free to Grow in Forestry website, so you too can benefit from these teachings and help move the sector forward with shifting the workplace culture to be more welcoming to all people. Our communication efforts are also very exciting. We are creating communication tools that can allow any company or organization in the forest sector, it doesn't just have to be in Canada, to use these messages or tactics in your own sphere of influence. Keep an eye out on the Free to Grow website and follow us on social media to find out when they will be available. We are developing the comms strategy right now, but anticipate tools to be available next spring. Tools like short 1-minute videos to help explain why this issue is important, social media templates that show unity across the country and now beyond on this topic, among other things. Another exciting action that has already happened in phase 2 is that our 2 executive leadership teams all signed off on our declaration of intent to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We shared that on social media at the beginning of National Forest Week in late September of 2022. You can also find it on our website. We are now inviting other company or organization to join us and essentially declare your commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. Please head over to the Free to Grow in Forestry website if you wish to do that. Our next steps, we are uniting as a sector and showing the world that through our efforts on diversity, equity, and inclusion, this sector gets it. We know there are workplace culture issues that need attention, and we're taking leadership to do something about it. We want to empower leaders and create champions that go beyond the 2 executive leadership teams. We will use the Free to Grow platform for webinars and communications and distinguish the forest sector as an employer of choice. By doing so, we hope to attract and retain new labor talent and create the competitive advantage for the forest sector. For more information, please contact us through our website or through social media. And I encourage everyone to sign up for the Free to Grow in Forestry newsletter. Thanks for listening. We look forward to collaboratively moving the sector forward.